So we have got through all of Act 1 and now we are jumping into Act 2. So there was a couple of things that I just wanted to go over just to make sure that we have the concept before we jump into Act 2 so that we can understand exactly what's happening. Act 2 happens really quickly. It is only 2 scenes, and that second scene is a son of a gun to read through and to fully understand. So in order to make sure that we see what Hamlet is doing, we need to make sure we understand why he's doing it. So here's the key thing that I want you to know is that in Shakespearean tragedies, everyone dies. And really, as an audience member, what you're doing is trying to piece together who's going to die next, who's going to be the one to kill the other person, in what order does it go, to see how it unfolds. And so that's essentially what we're going to be doing with Hamlet. So warning, everybody dies. So let's go back to Act 1. At the very end, Hamlet is called to the top of the castle because the guards have seen a ghost. Horatio was there. He saw a ghost that looks like Hamlet's father in his full war armor. And so he's asked Hamlet to come up and to confirm what they've seen. And so in this scene, the ghost calls Hamlet so that he can go talk to him. And there's a lot of concern about Hamlet's well-being because before we really jump into the idea that this is his father, we need to understand that their perspective on ghosts was the idea it could be a demon, it could be ill-intentioned, it may just be taking the shape of his father to lure him and then potentially cause him an ill fate. So there's a lot of concern about this ghost, but Hamlet, who is grieving the loss of his father, sees an image of his father and wants to know exactly what this ghost wants. And I can't say that I blame him, right? You want to believe that this is something that has been sent to you to tell you, to give you reassurance that it is your father, his beloved father. And so I can understand why Hamlet disregarded all care and concern for his well-being and followed this ghost. When he did, what he found out was that it was his father's ghost come back from purgatory, which is also important to understand. Purgatory is the in-between heaven and hell. Because he has unfinished business, he's stuck in this somewhat prison, and something has to be resolved for him to be able to move on. And so the ghost talks to Hamlet and says that he was not bitten by a snake, but in fact, Claudius, his brother, killed him and has assumed the throne. And so this lies in the crux of really setting into motion the conflict that we have within this play. We have a showdown between the prince, who wasn't set to take the throne. He was away when his father died. He was at university, and he's come back, and it's not uncommon that his uncle would assume the throne, seeing that he would be next in line according to the way that they have it organized. And so he wasn't set, Prince Hamlet was not set to assume the throne, but he is just simply grieving the loss of his father, and now he has found out that Claudius has killed him and assumed that position. The ghost also has tasked him with avenging his death. And so two things that are really, really important at this point are the plot and the conflict that has set about. And we also need to know characterization. We need to know the inner workings of each of these characters so that we can understand what they're doing and how they're going to respond to these conflicts. So at the end of Act 1, Hamlet has 3 choices. He's been told by this ghost that he was killed by his brother and that Hamlet needs to avenge his death. He could immediately go down and kill the king. He could rally his friends together, create an army, present their findings, and or just storm in and kill Claudius. Or he could take this as a personal task and he needs to do it alone. And so what we know at the end of Act 1 is that Hamlet has not necessarily looked at all the options, but he has gone with number 3. He has a number of people that can confirm what he has heard and what he has seen. However, Hamlet has taken this on as a personal task that he must do alone. And so almost right there, we have the fatal beginnings of why this is going to fail for Hamlet. And we know it's going to fail because all of them die in the end, including Hamlet. So, what do we know so far? So in the first act, what we've heard and seen from Hamlet is that he's well loved. He has many people around him. We know he's depressed. He's not in the right state of mind. He's grieving the loss of his father, and he seems bewildered by others who have quickly moved on. We know that he had a love interest in Ophelia, but that Polonius, her father, has told her to cut off all ties. We know that Laertes has gone back to university and that he doesn't have the usual supports. And he's stuck in this system of seeing everything that he's disgusted by, the marriage of his mother to his now uncle father. And so he's in a really bad place. We also know he's an emotional guy. We know that he was beloved and that he loves as much. And so we can see that he has many choices that he could have made. And the fact that he's choosing to do this alone is maybe not the best choice for him because of his state of mind, because that he now has to take on a task that maybe he's not ready for. Number 2, Claudius. We now know that he has assumed this throne because he has killed his brother, and so he is not necessarily the rightful king. So in addition to somewhat seeing in his speech that he wanted to move on, he wanted to get over the grief of the loss of the king and remain strong and united. Now we see the dark underbelly of really how he's assumed that position and why he wants to move on so quickly, because he doesn't want people really to question the death of the king and his now position. We also see with Polonius, the characterization of this. We have 2 strong characters who are opposing each other in number 1 and 2, Hamlet and Claudius. And then we have Polonius, and we can kind of consider Polonius as the meddler. He's going to be going back and forth between Hamlet and Claudius, not really taking sides, just trying to figure out what's going on with Hamlet. But in doing so, in meddling in this situation, he's actually going to make it worse. So aside from these 3 characters that are strong characters in this conflict, in this storyline, that we also have this looming story of Fortinbras, and it is similar to the story of Hamlet and the death of his father and the uncle assuming the throne. And so, unlike Hamlet, Fortinbras has brought together an army, and he seems to be rallying so that he can, and they're not really sure the intention, but they think it's to go back and get the land that was taken from his father by King Hamlet. And so we have this story, and it's going to be looming. We actually don't see Fortinbras until Act 4, and it's very brief. Very, very brief. And we don't actually see him. It's just this looming story. In fact, if you look to the very end of Act 5 scene, the very ending scene where they're all dead, that's when Fortinbras comes in. So, what is the point of this story that doesn't really affect the plot line? What is the purpose of even talking about Fortinbras? Yes, it sets the tone of a looming war that could be potentially happening, and Claudius is quite leery of this situation. He also wants to make sure that his people know that he's in control of the situation. So I guess it kind of sets him up in terms of understanding his character and also sets them on edge. But here's the key part. Here's essentially what it does. Fortinbras, Prince Fortinbras, is known as a foil character. The purpose of a foil is to be the exact opposite of what the main character is. And so when we see Fortinbras, who is in the same situation as Hamlet, raising up an army, taking control of the situation, and we can start to see him as a foil, we can then assume that Hamlet is the exact opposite of that. So what is Hamlet? Is Hamlet weak? Not necessarily. But would he handle the same situation the way that Fortinbras did? No. And will that, knowing that Fortinbras ends up at the end when they're all dead, if Hamlet had taken a different approach, maybe it would have had a different ending. And so the whole purpose of the story of Fortinbras, when it comes in, just so you know, is to reinforce Hamlet's weakness. And so that's what we want to focus on. We don't want to see Hamlet as a weakling. We just want to see him maybe more emotional and less physical in terms of the threat that he poses to Claudius. So, going into Act 2, Hamlet needs to find out if Claudius is guilty. So, why didn't he storm in and kill Claudius? Because that would have been considered murder and he would have been murdered himself. And so, that's not really the act of revenge if he had just gone in and killed him and nobody knew why he did that. So that's important for him to know. So he needs to know, one, is this ghost telling me the truth? I need to know if Claudius is guilty. It also buys him some time. I don't think he's ready for this task. I think this is a lot to take on. And I think he needs time to process and sort of wrap his head around it. Number two, Claudius has a Hamlet problem. Hamlet's moping around the castle and it's really bringing Claudius down and he's tired of dealing with it. So he's okay to offload this problem onto Polonius, and that there leads into more problems because Polonius is on his own little sidetrack and doesn't see what's right in front of him. And so aside from that, Claudius still doesn't necessarily believe Polonius's approach, and so he wants to take his own approach to monitoring this Hamlet situation. He doesn't really want to invest too much time. He doesn't want to do anything. He wants others to do it for him. And number three, Polonius meddles and complicates the situation. So these are the things that you need to know going into Act 2. And the key part of Act 2 is all about spying. So they need to know a bunch of stuff. People want to know stuff about Hamlet. Hamlet wants to know stuff about other people. And there's people caught in the middle of all of this. And so that's what I want you to be thinking about going into Act 2 is these plot points, knowing this about these characters, but also the idea of trying to find out more information about each of them. So hope that sets the context, and good luck reading through or listening to Act 2.